Porque na vida a gente quer se conhecer cá entre nós.
Dear friends, let's explore together the voice of the silence as the path of compassion, and let us be inspired to bring this compassion into our everyday life. The book itself was written in 1889 by H.P. Blavatsky, and by many students it has been considered to be the precious pearl of all theosophical literature. We will go even further. We will say that it strikes the keynote necessary for truly being able to, in an intuitive way, penetrate her other literature, such as The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled and all her articles, because it strikes the keynote of compassion, and it is the path of the heart that opens up for another type of understanding than the pure intellectual. We may not at all, understand the terminology when we first encounter the voice of the silence. But there is something in this beautiful poetry that awakens our soul memory. It's like a reminiscence, a remembrance, a resonance from some time long past ago. And it awakens a memory of who we truly are as spiritual beings. In that sense, it constitutes a process of initiation, and it provides a very powerful meeting with ourselves. But it also invites us into the current of all previous and all future enlightened beings. We now enter what is called the great chain, the golden chain of the protection wall, or the Guru Parampara chain, that we are always being encouraged by those who have gone before, and hopefully we will be of encouragement to those that comes after. This little white blurred point in the dull black background we found as a good symbol for the voice of the silence. We may have heard it the moments we listen to our intuition or we listen to our voice of conscience. But mainly it starts to get itself more heard when we decide to ask those important questions in life, like, who am I? How does it all work? And what is the purpose of my life? But we also know in our everyday life, filled of stress, filled of all kind of troubles and tasks we have to take care of, and the global situation with all its environmental problems, political problems, wars, etc., that it's very hard to discern this voice, the voice of the silence, because of all the static noise. It's constantly disturbing, and it's just like a very faint voice in the beginning. Now, the book is divided into 3 fragments, and for this talk, we have chosen to give them 3 different keywords: seek, find, and share. So fragment 1, which is called The Voice of the Silence, has the keyword seek. This is a type of preparation. We have to find out who we truly are as spiritual beings. We have to move from what is called pratyahara to dharana. Pratyahara, extremely simplified, is when we are totally controlled by our senses. For example, I walk down the road, I walk past a Starbucks cafe, I smell the lovely smell of freshly brewed coffee, and I say to myself, oh, I need a coffee. A couple of seconds later, I remind myself that I have just finished my breakfast, I just had my cup of coffee. But this is a little bit how the senses works. It makes us think that we desire something before even we knew of its existence. So we have to be able, in that sense, to practice dharana, which is the focusing of the mind. Is concentration the first step in all true meditation? So the first important question to focus on is, who am I? And why is it so hard to find out who I really am? What is the main obstacle for it? And the voice of the silence has the beautiful answer: the mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. So in order to be able to slay the slayer, we need to understand how that mind works. And here is one attempt to try and understand it. The mind is a vast field of experience. It has been called the instrument of the inner spiritual man. And different aspects of the mind opens up to us depending on what point of identification we have. Say that I have a very personal point of identification. I am Eva, I am Herman, I am Kirk, or I'm someone else. If I limit my point of identification to the persona, it means that I only use a very narrow slide of the mind. I use that aspect of the mind which tend to separateness, to tend to selfishness, to tend to the attitude of, what can I get out of this? Now, as we begin to walk the spiritual path, we begin to identify with something else. We begin to see that there is that thing called individuality, which comes from the word individus, which means indivisible. It gives a sense of I am I. I am I, whether I'm a baby, I'm a teenager, I'm a mature person, or I'm in old age. There is that golden thread that runs from birth to death, but also beyond, from life to life to life, until we are fully realized as spiritual beings. And of course, when I start to identify with this instead of just the persona, a totally new vista of the mind opens up. A vista, you could say, that leads more to the question, how can I contribute? How can I become less selfish? How can I go beyond the idea of separateness? Then there's also the universal aspect or point of identification, the I am identification, the identification with the one universal consciousness, the realization that the individual aspect is but an aspect of the universal one. And this, of course, for fully realized being, makes an immense difference. A fully realized being can move through the different layers of the mind and has aligned the 3 points of identification. In the first fragment, this is being described as the 3 halls, a way to understand the mind. We have, for example, the hall of ignorance, which is that state of mind where we are ignorant of anything else but the material, purely selfish. We have the hall of learning, where the consciousness is expanding, and we're seeing different aspects of life. There is something more to it. There is the whole astral world to be explored. And then there's the hall of wisdom, the hall of our true spiritual nature, there where we find all inspiration for a compassionate life. And beyond that, it is said we have the veil of bliss, which is also been told sevenfold. Now, if we try to break it down to something that may be a bit more understandable, we can see it in a 24-hour cycle. We have to move from the hall of ignorance, the hall of waking, through the hall of learning, the dreaming state, the astral plane, and we have to move into the true plane, the dreamless sleep plane. And in order to do this consciously with awareness, we have to develop that which is called the witness position. We have to be able, when we put our head on the pillow and let the body go to sleep, we have to be able to move consciously into the dreaming state, and then from the dreaming state into the dreamless, and then bring all the spiritual inspiration and intuitions back through the dreaming state, back to the waking state. And this is something we can practice every day, every night. So practice before going to sleep, a way to strengthen this witness position, apart from trying to be consciously present in everyday life, in every moment, we can follow Pythagoras' advice, make a review of the past day. Make that conscious review of how the day has been. Just like we have a review at the end of this life, within very few seconds, we have the life review, like we know from near-death experiences. So here we are trying to practice it consciously, not saying this is bad or this is good, but trying to remain in the witness position. This will facilitate our ability to move from waking through dreaming to the dreamless state and back consciously. Now, let's try and explore the second fragment, the two paths. The key word here is find. We have to discover what the two paths are about. And we have to be able to move from dharana, the concentration of the mind, into the state of contemplation, which is kind of a prolonged dharana or focusing. For example, when we study metaphysical literature, we don't only have to be able to focus on what we are reading, but we actually have to try to penetrate into the words, into the ideas themselves, in order to understand what they truly mean, what it means from an intuitive perspective. The same when we have a meeting with another person in everyday life, when we truly try to listen to someone, we have to be focused in our mind, but we also have to be able to maintain that focus so that the person that is telling us something important feels that they are truly being listened to, and not only being listened to, but also understood. So here in the second fragment, we find the terms liberation and renunciation. And the statement is being written that the path is one disciple, yet in the end twofold. Marked are its stages by 4 and 7 portals. At one end, bliss immediate, and at the other, bliss deferred. Both are of merit to reward, the choice is thine. So let's see if we can make it a little bit more understandable. And this is, of course, only one way of looking upon it and understanding it. We must remember it's a very limited view, but still we would like to share it with you. So stage 1 has to do with the 4 portals that leads to liberation. From a 24-hour perspective, we have to be able to consciously transition without losing our conscious awareness from the different states that we talked about before. So going from waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep, turiya, and back. Now, when we're able to do that, we are also being able to train ourselves to go from one life to the next life and to the next life consciously, until we have, you could say, worked out all our karma. And then such a being that has achieved this has the right to the bliss of nirvana and can choose to go into nirvana to realize their individual bliss. Now, stage the second has to do with renunciation and the 7 portals. Such a being as a bodhisattva of compassion, or sometimes called a Nirmanakaya, has also have to go through the first stage of liberation. But instead of then choosing to go into nirvana for the individual state of bliss, they choose to remain until every other sentient being has reached the same point. Now, the 7 portals are portals which behind them each is an occult force that emanates straight from the 7 Jnani Buddhas, or the 7 different aspects of one universal consciousness. Now, Bodhisattva of compassion, or Nirmanakaya, needs to be able to know how to handle and practice these 7 forces in order to be able to help all sentient beings in all aspects of the 3 worlds. To sum it up, a Bodhisattva of compassion is thus a being that has transcended both samsara and nirvana, has transcended all material desires, but also the desire for spiritual individual bliss. In one way, you could say that liberation is to have the awareness of the timeless in time, whereas renunciation is the ability to unfold the timeless within time. It means that a bodhisattva needs to be able to bring with it the timelessness and operate from that timelessness in order to help all sentient beings. Now, I would like us all, if we would choose to close our eyes And you can repeat silently within yourself while I read the Kuan pledge out loud. Never will I seek nor receive private individual salvation. Never will I enter into final peace alone, but forever and everywhere will I live and strive for the redemption of every sentient being throughout the world from the bonds of conditioned existence. Now, let's see if we can practice this in everyday life. Now, one way is to reinforce your pledge and let it be the last thought before going to sleep, and also the first thought when you wake up. You may remember from theosophical literature that the last thought of this life seems to have an influence on the after-death states, as well as having some kind of influence of the coming incarnation. Now, in order to practice how to, you could say, maintain our motivation for compassionate service, by letting ourselves remind ourselves and reinforce the pledge before going to bed, and the first thing that when we wake up, it will help us to maintain that motivation of renunciation. With that said, let's move into the last fragment, fragment 3, the 7 portals. The key word here is share. What fun is there to acquire wisdom if we cannot share it? So self-realization is the ability to move from dhyana, the extended concentration, into contemplation, the ability to penetrate into the ideas themselves, or you could say to the heart of any matter, and to remain in that state of samadhi, which is a conscious, persistent awareness, compassionate in every moment, in every thought, in every word, in every deed. So self-realization from that perspective has been summed up in this beautiful sentence: act for and as the self of all sentient beings in whatever you do. And of course, we may ask ourselves in the beginning of the path, who am I who know so little? Do I really have anything that I can share? And this beautiful sentences from the voice says, point out the way, however dimly and lost among the host, as does the evening star to those who tread their path in darkness. And this is a very crucial few lines, because we need to remind ourselves that we are always both student and teacher at the same time. If we tend to focus on the student role, we may get crystallized in it, and we will never develop self-reliance. We will be like those little baby birds who open their beaks to continuously receive information from the outside. On the other hand, if we crystallize in the teacher role, we will definitely pound the foundation for spiritual pride. So the things to be realized here is that it's a fluidity. We always have to learn, but we also have to share what we learn in order for it to be a flow in it. Now, let's spend a few moments now to look at the path. It has been said that we cannot travel the path until we have become that path ourselves. So one way of viewing it is to see that the path could be like a state of consciousness, sometimes called antaskarana, which has 7 different levels, we are told. It is that state of consciousness that connects our lower everyday mind with a higher mind. And it's a state, you could say, that each time we are able to realize a metaphysical idea into an ethical act of compassion in everyday life, then we are in that state. We are on the path. But of course, only a true, you could say, a completed being can achieve this all the time. We very often fall off the path and then we climb up again. But it doesn't matter how many times we fall, as long as we climb up again. So the treading of the path is associated with the cultivation of virtues. And virtue, you could say, constitutes the right relationship between the whole and the part. There has to be a synchronicity between the two. In that sense, practicing the paramitas is a calibration of our own being to what is called being. But it has also been said that the paramita are practiced with a background of the unmanifested. And what does that mean? One way of understanding it is that there are not ethical rules that are imposed on us from the outside, but they're actually occult forces within ourselves that comes about as we spiritually mature. So it's a process of maturation that it has to come from the inside and gradually. So it is our own, it's not imposed from the outside. So we have to realize the paramita is an occult force. As we said before, it's a force that is behind those portals. We are the golden keys. When we have developed our capacity, our intuition, our Buddhic quality of discernment, so we can open up those portals wisely with compassion, they will be forces that activate and transform our whole nature. The pledge that we have taken makes a focus that is stronger. It gives what is called an intensified karma, and we will see how this works. But keep in mind, it's a process of transformation necessary. Everything that is not compatible to the aim that we have to practice these paramitas or occult forces will come up to the surface. That is, it will come up to become conscious in our own mind in order that we can start to transform it. So let's look at the paramitas one by one. The first one is Dana, the key of charity and love immortal, strikes the keynote for the whole spiritual journey, that of compassion. And I don't know how it is for you, friends, but very often when I try to practice this in everyday life, I constantly stumble. I constantly find myself irritated, critical, and all those qualities that are actually working against Dana. And of course, it's easy in such a position to lose hope and feel despair. But remember, this is actually a good proof that the process is working, because it is bringing up everything to the surface that is not compatible with Dana. The same with Shila, the key of harmony in thought, word, and act. The key that counterbalances the cause and the effect and leaves no further room for karmic action. Just think for a moment what a challenge it will be to be able to be and express compassion both in your thoughts, in your word, and your act. To leave no trace behind you but compassion and love. Therefore, no further room for karmic action. But I will dare us all and say that this is more challenging than walking a tightrope over the Grand Canyon. Let's move to the third paramita, Shanti, patience sweet that naught can ruffle. The ability to be compassionate and to see unity in diversity the whole time. Not see that if someone is different, it's not as good because it's not myself, but it is yourself. It is unity, but in diversity. And of course, the moment I sit in meditation and to the moment I sit in my car heading down the freeway, someone cuts me off. Well, there goes the patience. I become impatient. I become irritable. So these are all the things that come up to the surface that needs to be taken care of. But impatience is also so much more. Impatience is the inability to stay in the present moment, whereas patience is the ability to stay in the witness position, is the ability to be here and now continuously. And here comes the fourth paramita, that of viraga, indifference to pleasure and to pain, illusion conquered, truth alone perceived, transcend likes and dislikes. This is the paramita of balance. You've had 3 before and you have 3 after. So here it can go both ways. It can go up or down, my friends. And I would just like to challenge you. So if you go back to the moment when you woke up this morning and until this point where we're at now, how many likes and dislikes have you been able to detect in yourself? Probably quite a few. All from the point of view that the coffee is not enough strong. I like marmalade. I don't like cheese. I like something else and this and that. So it's a tremendous, tremendous task to transcend likes and dislikes. It is that capacity to transcend the three gunas, the three qualities of sattva, rajas, and tamas, and move into nirguna. It's also the ability to do like what is described in the fourth book of Patanjali, the isolation of the modifications of the mind so it doesn't affect the soul. And when that takes place, even if it's just for a moment at a time, in those moments when we are actually able to transcend our personal self likes and dislikes and do something out of compassion for another human being, then what we find is that virya, this dauntless energy that fights its way to the supernal truth out of the mire of life's terrestrial. It is this very force of divine will, the very force of Kamadevi compassion that makes us transcend all our likes and dislikes and to move in, you could say, to another state, a state of dhyana, whose golden gate, once open, leads the Narjo towards the realm of Sat Eternal and its ceaseless contemplation. Of course, when these paramitas are described, they are described from the point of view of perfection or perfectibility. But we have also to see that each moment that we are capable of experiencing this are golden moments. It's also important to be charitable towards your own personality, to see yourself as a guiding force for that personality so it can move in the right direction and be transformed into a useful instrument for the inner spiritual being. So those moments is the ability to have a ceaseless contemplation of what is truth. And that is blossoming forth as prajna, divine wisdom, even that sevenfold, we are told. And the force to unlock that is the key to which makes of the man a god, creating him a bodhisattva, son of the dhyanis. And so this is the spiritual potential of each one of us, and which is in the heart of all sentient beings waiting to be realized. So practice for this in the beginner state is to focus on one paramita for each day of the week. In doing so, we are reminded of the old saying that the way to realize something is to continuously dwelling upon it. So when we have this paramita as a keynote, one for each day of the week, or however we want to practice it, it tends to activate that force in ourselves. And in this way, it will aid us in the process of realizing it. So again, please close your eyes and listen to one of the most beautiful quotes from the Voice of the Silence, from the third fragment. Compassion is no attribute. It is the law of laws, eternal harmony, Alaya self, a shoreless universal essence, the light of everlasting right and fitness of all things, the law of love eternal. The more thou dost become at one with it, thy being melted in its being, the more thy soul unites with that which is, the more thou wilt become compassion absolute. So whenever we have those moments of despair, it may be wise to remind ourselves of the master's words from the Mahatma letters. Try, ever keep trying. And as references for this talk, we have used The Voice of the Silence by HBB, The Secret Doctrine with its diagrams and stanzas, also from HBB, Studies in the Voice of the Silence by B.P. Wadhya, The Creative Silence by Rohit Mehta, Patanjali's Yoga Aphorism in the rendition of William Quan Judge, and The Science of Yoga by Mr. Timely. So thank you for being patient and listening so attentively. Thank you.
Porque na vida a gente quer se conhecer pra